The Blackwood Deception true life story. Ashford was a kind of town where old money spoke louder than laws, and no one spoke louder than Mr. Jonathan Blackwood. He was a man of distinction. Sharp suits, a silver-tipped cane he never needed, and a smile that convinced both bankers and criminals alike that he was always in control. For decades, Blackwood and his business partner, Charles Redmond, had been inseparable. They were the kind of men who toasted success over brandy, who signed contracts behind closed doors, who understood that fortunes were made not by playing fair, but by playing smart. But by 2012, the empire they built began to crack. One rainy evening, Redmond arrived at Blackwood's estate. Dripping wet, his expression tense. Blackwood, seated near the fire, looked up with a faint smirk. "Charles, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Perhaps I have," Redmond muttered, shaking the rain from his coat. "The feds are sniffing around the shipping contract again. They've been asking about falsified manifests." Blackwood waved him off. "They've asked before. They'll ask again. They bark, but they don't bite. Not if you feed them the right scraps." Redmond nodded, but his eyes lingered too long on the fire. Blackwood didn't notice, didn't care, that his friend's hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a drink. What Blackwood didn't know was that, just days before, Redmond had sat in a sterile government office across town. Federal agents had slid a stack of documents across the table. Fraudulent ledgers, offshore accounts, proof of crimes that carried decades in prison. And then they made him an offer. Asterisk, testify against Blackwood. Walk free. Asterisk, the quiet betrayal. For weeks, Redmond lived a double life. To Blackwood, he was the same loyal partner, laughing over old stories and planning their next expansion into South America. Behind the mask, he was an informant, wearing a wire, feeding the feds every detail of Blackwood's empire. One night, as the two men sat in the oak-paneled study, Blackwood leaned back with his glass of whiskey. "Charles, if anything ever happens to me, you'd carry the torch, wouldn't you?" Redmond forced a smile. "Of course, Jonathan. Always." The recorder in his jacket pocket caught every word. It happened on a cold November morning. Blackwood arrived at his office downtown, expecting another day of business as usual. Instead, black SUVs lined the street, and armed agents swarmed the building. "Jonathan Blackwood," one agent barked. "You're under arrest for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy." As the cuffs tightened around his wrists, Blackwood's first thought was not a law, but a betrayal. His empire was too well guarded, his secrets too well buried. Only one man could have delivered the knife. And he was right. At the courthouse days later, Blackwood locked eyes with Redmond across the room. Redmond sat calmly, protected by the government, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. When their gazes met, Redmond offered the faintest of nods, an unspoken acknowledgement that the brotherhood they once shared was nothing more than ashes. The trial was a spectacle. Former employees testified. Documents surfaced. Recordings were played in court. Every word of Redmond's betrayal echoed through the chamber. Blackwood, once the untouchable king of Ashford, was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Redmond, in exchange for his testimony, walked free. Not only free, he quietly assumed control of several Blackwood's seized properties, shielded by government deals. As the prison doors slammed shut, Blackwood's voice was low, bitter, and cold as iron. A man can forgive many things, but never betrayal. And so, the legacy of Jonathan Blackwood ended not in a hail of bullets or the fall of an empire, but with a friend's quiet treachery. Proof that in crime, as in life, the sharpest knives are hidden in the hands of those closest to you.